get out there and do it. It's an experiment. The whole of life is an experiment.
On the show today, we talk with Lorrin Maughan, a personal leadership and compassionate accountability coach. Lorrin shares a great perspective on networking for introverts and extroverts and addresses some common misperceptions. This is The Career Cue, the podcast focused on helping you navigate the signals in your career to keep you growing and moving forward in business and in life. Here's today's host, Stacy Harris.
So welcome to the show, Lorrin. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Stacy. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. So the listeners know that you're not able to actually make it into studio today, but where are you calling from?
I'm currently in Wichita, Kansas.
And that's kind of the Midwest of the country, is that right?
Yeah, we're pretty much almost in the middle of the country, I'd say.
Nice. And then, oh gosh, is that Tornado Alley country?
Kind of, yes.
Oh gosh. Okay, so we have to have a conversation offline about the Tornado Alley, and you and I both know that most things in Australia can kill you, but the whole tornado thing is just beyond my scope of understanding of how you deal with that. So, but
right, it can be it can be quite terrifying.
Right. Give me a crocodile any day, right?
At least you know where he is, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's another show. Anyway, so we're actually here to talk to you today about networking specifically for introverts. So before we get into kind of the introvert part of the conversation, let's talk about networking in general.
Sure.
It's a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot, and I'm guilty of it too. Like, oh, my network of people, but let's really talk about what is a network. So,
right, and it's a good question because you're right. It is a buzzword. It's also a trigger word in that a lot of people hear the word network or networking, and they'll get a knot in their stomach, or they'll get a lump in their throat, or their chest will get tight because they're thinking of a network in this kind of predatory sense, I guess, and that we've been taught to think of networking or our own network as something to mine or to exploit. And in reality, a network is really just a system of connections, right? So if you think about anything, think about your computer network. It's computers connected to each other through a grid, right? A forest is a network. A family is a network, right? A chain, a fiber, everything, a tapestry, a quilt. They're all networks because it's all basically systems of connections, things being connected to each other, interconnected, and always in connection. And so when we think about networking or we think about a network, I really want to help people to reframe it and to kind of think of it a little bit more as this is something that is natural and ubiquitous. We're always in network.
What would you consider or recommend as a more palatable word or a term to describe the group of people, whether it be on a professional basis or a personal? Like, is there another term that you would use that maybe for the introverts of the world that might be a little softer to land?
Honestly, Stacy, I just call it community.
Yeah, and I think when you think about it to describe it as a community, it feels a little bit more wrap your arms around it, right? And the safety and the comfort of your community of people and the support community or support network that you have around you. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's actually one definition of networking is that we have a strategic and fluid practice of connecting people for mutual benefit. And, when you think of community, you think of mutual benefit.
Yeah, it's not about going in with an agenda and it's one-sided. It's building those relationships and feeling like you're a part of something bigger.
Very, very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so.
So let's actually talk about, so we've got the term network, right, or community. Let's go into the networking, the verb of it. So what is networking versus what is not networking?
Networking, the way that I look at it, is a strategic cultivation and sustenance of a system. So it's really looking to create and to cultivate. So cultivate meaning grow and nurture and sustain right? A system of mutually beneficial connections, right? So your network being a system of connections, you want it to be mutually beneficial. So to me, to network is very much, it's kind of like looking at it as you would cultivate a garden. You know, you want to promote or improve the growth of something. You want to give it attention. You want to really work on it. And ultimately, there is a reaping, right? Something comes back. But when you think about that, the opposite of the word cultivate, words like destroy, ignore, neglect, right? If you're not cultivating your network, your community, you're ignoring it, you're neglecting it, you're destroying it by neglect.
Okay, so it needs feeding.
It does need feeding, yeah.
Okay, that's actually a great analogy because I do not have a green thumb at all.
Me neither.
Oh my gosh. It's more of a black thumb, but, my great-grandmother would be cursing me right now if she understood just how badly I am at that. But it's true. Like, if you leave it too long and it gets stale, it ultimately withers away.
Exactly.
And to try and reinvest in that, to find that sustenance again, probably takes even more effort to start over than it does to keep it going continuously, right?
It really does.
Yeah.
And often, a lot of the times people kind of come at this idea of networking in this current iteration of this current definition of it on an as needs basis or as a just in time kind of basis. They think of it as a thing I do. And really the critical word there is strategic cultivation. Right? It's got to be strategic. So just like when you're working on a garden, you think about what grows at what part of the year, right? What works well with something else in that piece of soil, what it needs for nurturance and for sustenance. And so you're always thinking long term, and you're always thinking in terms of interconnections and interdependencies, right? So networking really, when it comes down to it, is not this activity that you plug in at a certain point in your process, right? Your networking, your maintenance and your building of your community is an ongoing strategic investment.
So it's definitely something that when you look at your toolkit, it needs to be something that is kind of part of your everyday life. And not to say that you actually have to be actively networking every single day, but it's not something that you only do when you're looking for a job or you're looking to close a deal if you're in sales, or, it's not because you have the end result or the end game being something that you get. It's, these things take time. It's almost relationship management. Right.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And it's not a quid pro quo thing. Networking, yes, there is what goes around comes around kind of thing to it, but it's not something you can't authentically network if really all you're doing is trying to get something back. Right? You have to invest in it. You have to really take a bigger picture view. And honestly, I think this is where introverts particularly have a superpower. And they're not tapping into the superpower that they have in terms of how to approach networking in a way that works best for them.
Okay, so let's talk about introverts. And I think anyone that's known me or has even probably listened to this podcast will probably guess that I'm more on the extrovert kind of side of things. Although as I get older, I think I'm actually becoming more of an introvert. For folks like me who probably considered more extrovert, what's the definition of an introvert? We'll get into how differently extroverts and introverts kind of approach things, but let's actually talk about what does an introvert look like? Okay,
so really an introvert, and a lot of people mistake quiet people for introverts, and that's not always the case, right? So an introvert is really somebody who recharges through time alone. So they may not even be quiet. I mean, oftentimes people are actually quite surprised to find out that I'm a pretty high introvert because I'll go to an event and I'll be all over everybody and I'll be deep in conversation with people and very much engaged with them. That's, just because you're introverted doesn't mean that you are socially awkward, right? So I think some people have kind of given introverts a bit of a bad rap in that they think that these are people who are incapable of operating in a social environment. And that's not the truth. Obviously, an introvert may have higher levels of social anxiety just because of the fact that being in those environments does take more of a toll on them. And it's not their preference to be out engaging with a lot of people at a time. So, when you come to it, introverts, our world is kind of geared to the extroversion. It's geared to outward looking. It's geared to the bigger the network, the more important it is, or the more valuable it is. It's geared to expression. If you look at how our school systems operate right now, for example, it's, you get points for participation. And if you're just sitting back taking it in, you're not being necessarily valued as participating. And so really when it comes to it, the extroverts are a little bit more outwardly focused. The introverts are more inwardly focused. And so they tend to take things in, process them internally, access their energy through some recharge time alone, whereas an extrovert will access their energy by being in touch with other people's energy, and they'll process externally. So it's really just a way of processing and bringing in energy and information.
And just because you don't see it externally being pushed out doesn't mean that it's not being processed or considered or taken into consideration.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So, for example, you could be, like me, you could be an outgoing introvert, right? So you're still outgoing and you're still social, but when it comes down to it, I must have time alone or else I will be very depleted. And if you're going to give me something to think about, give me time to bring it into myself, think about it, and then give you an answer.
Okay. And especially in the work environment, that's critical, right? Because
absolutely,
a majority of the time you're going to be surrounded by a mixture of both more introverted individuals versus extroverted. I would guess that there's some challenges introverts face because the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Person who's the loudest or the biggest in the room is the one that gets heard. So that's got to be really challenging for introverts.
It can be. And the other thing that's very challenging, and this is something that'll probably resonate with a lot of women in the workforce, is the introvert is often the person who comes up with the idea, and the extrovert is often the one who'll get the credit for that.
Oh.
So it's kind of, similar to a situation where a woman might come up with an idea in a meeting and her male counterpart will say, yeah, that's a great idea, and then he'll get the credit for it. Oftentimes, that's exactly what happens with introverts and extroverts. The introvert will make the point. The extrovert will be like, hey, that's a great idea, blah, 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 talk about it and get the credit for it. Inadvertently, it's not necessarily some kind of Machiavellian strategy on their part. It just tends to be that way.
Yeah.
And, both of us come from a recruiting background. A lot of people make assumptions about what people will be good at. So they make assumptions, for example, that salespeople should be extroverted, when actually an ambivert, which is somebody who can sway or flex to either side of that preference, makes a much better salesperson because they can lean into their introversion to listen deeply. And then they can lean into their extroversion in order to get out there and make the calls. And so, when you're thinking about it, when we're not really thinking black and white, we're kind of thinking a continuum, right? The majority of the population sits kind of in that ambivert range, that central part of the continuum. Then you have the people who are extremely introverted and extremely extroverted, probably not as many of them in the population. So it tends to be like you'll have a preference towards introversion or a preference towards extroversion. But honestly, if you are able to value your needs and to know what your needs are, you can start to learn to flex. And so you can lean into whichever side of the continuum that you need to be more effective in the workplace.
So there may be an opportunity for career or professional development there or growth, right? That if you find yourself with some room to move within that gray space, you have a tendency towards the darker gray, not that there's a dark side versus a light side. Depends on who you talk to, I guess. But
it's a nuance.
Yeah. But there might be an opportunity to stretch a little. But let's actually talk about the importance of networking in your career or for business. I mean, it's not exclusive for, a traditional career, but especially, if you're a business owner too, I mean, networking is key in order to be able to, one, gain business and to keep it. But, you had mentioned earlier that going to an event or networking with others or being around a lot of people for individuals that maybe lean a little bit more on the introverted side can feel kind of physically drained and especially mentally drained at the end of something like that. So what's your advice on kind of approaching a networking event as an introvert?
So there's a couple of things that I'm going to talk to there. First of all is don't feel that you have to network like everybody else. I think that that's a really important thing. A lot of people are like, well, I've got to go to my Chamber of Commerce event, or I've got to go to BNI, or I've got to do this or that. Honestly, I can't stand those big events. I loathe them, right? But I've found other ways to network that are more effective for me. If I do end up having to or feeling that it is strategic to go to one of those big events, there are ways that I feel that I can handle it better and that I can be more effective. So we'll talk a little bit about those. But first of all, let's talk about the importance of networking. Networking is absolutely critical. Oftentimes, by the time you're in your early 30s, if you haven't developed a sound community in your career, in your life, honestly, this is bigger than just business. There is a correlation between the strength of your network being the strength of your community, right? The strength of your support network and your longevity, right? So people who have atrophied communities don't live as long. That's a really important thing. So we need our communities for our health and for our longevity. So that's a really important thing. Knowing that we have a support network that can sustain us through dark times, personally, professionally, whatever, right? And then also that can help us grow through into opportunity. So very important for our health as well as for our career and our well-being. Yeah. On the career side, there was some research that was done a while back by a group called the Delphi Consulting Group, and they basically said that about 80% of knowledge generally, and if you think about this, it's kind of mind-boggling, right, is undocumented, unstructured, and stored as individual knowledge. So if you think about, let's think about the internet, right? How much information is out there, right? And you think of every single individual you know as a search engine, right? And they have access to this amazing amount of information. You just have to ask the right questions, right? So for your career and for your development, tapping into that tribal knowledge and collaborating and learning from other people is really, really important. It's important to maintain your visibility so that people know that they can come to you as a search engine and you can also go to them. It's important to know how to ask questions and what questions to ask. So when you have a really strong community, you know who's good for what, right? You also have that social proof element where you may need to connect with somebody, for example, somebody who knows something about, let's say working with veterans, right, who are coming back from active duty. Then if I say, yeah, Stacy, I know somebody and this is what she does with them and this is how she works with them, you can trust that information more than if you'd gotten it from a complete stranger. But it also gives credibility, right? So you have the social proof element. You've got the ability to trust information that you get from people that you know. That's really important. So networking, when we're in network, it's not just about going to events, right? It's about keeping in touch with people. It's about reaching out and asking questions. It's about noticing stuff about people, So, for example, LinkedIn gives us fabulous opportunities, hey, congratulate so-and-so on their new job, stuff like that. That is such gold for an introvert, right? Because one of the tendencies of an introvert is to go into a more deep one-on-one interaction, right? Rather than just kind of machine gun or shotgunning the situation, going and talking to a bunch of different people, right? So when you have the ability to get targeted information like that, oh, so-and-so just started a new job, then you can lean into that. You can reach out to them. You can talk to them. Hey, congratulations. Tell me more about the job. Would love to catch up and hear more about it.
Lorrin, that's fantastic. We see those things every single day and we hear about them too. So next time you're at a coffee shop, or if you hear from, a friend or a former coworker, or you see in LinkedIn that they'd received a new job or a promotion, or, they're celebrating a milestone, it's a great opportunity to kind of, as you mentioned, lean in or open the door to that conversation and kind of flex those networking muscles that you might want to work on. So that actually will segue into the next segment that I want to get into, so we can get really kind of actionable things that we, our listeners can take away with them today. So let's take a quick break. So when we come back, we'll actually talk about some of the specific recommendations that Lorrin has for introverts in networking situations.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to check out the show notes at thecareerq.com, where you can also subscribe to the podcast and sign up for our newsletter.
So welcome back. Today we're actually talking with Lorrin Maughan about networking for introverts. And Lorrin's got some great information that can be shared for anyone. If you're considered an introvert or an extrovert, or somewhere in that gray space in between, where Lorrin's kind of indicated that most people sit. So let's get into, Lorrin, the action items that people can take away today and what people can do to kind of improve or optimize their networking situations.
Sure. Okay. So most people think of networking as those events that you go to, right? The Chamber of Commerce, the BNI, those sorts of things. And yes, those are good opportunities. They're generally something that an introvert will lean away from. So let's start with those first. You will go to those events occasionally. They're good strategic opportunities in some instances. Don't force yourself to go if it's not something where you're going to feel comfortable. Because honestly, if you're going to be there and feel completely out of your depth, feeling completely awkward, you may not actually be doing yourself as much of a favor as you think. So first of all, think about what makes me comfortable. Where am I going to be in my best element? If you do have to go to those large events, a couple of tips for introverts. First and foremost, be authentic, be honest, and be yourself. I can't tell you how many times I've sidled up to somebody and said, I can't stand these events. What about you? Right? And that person also happens to be like glued to the wall with the deer in the headlight look, right? The minute you do that with somebody who's looking the way you feel, they'll be like, oh, thank God, another one. I'm not by myself.
Someone else out there. Yeah.
Right? So it's okay to tell people that's something, but, don't go up to the person who's, holding court at the front of the room. But you will find other people that are quite clearly feeling as uncomfortable as you do.
Yep.
Do them a favor. The biggest thing that I can do in one of those events is find somebody else who's looking uncomfortable and help them out, right? Go and give them a hand, right? Just walk up to them and say, I can't stand these events, right? I'm completely out of my depth here. Hi, I'm Lorrin, And then that way you have an ally, right? The two of you are in this together now.
Yes.
And that makes all the difference in the world, right? Yeah. So if you can find somebody that you can just give them a hand, right? Help them out. I can tell you what, it'll make you feel more confident. It'll make them feel grateful. You've already made a connection.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. The other thing I always do also is look for, is there anybody in the room that I know? If I know one person in the room, then maybe what I can do is that person that I just gave a hand to, I can say, come on, I know one person here. Let me introduce you.
That's fantastic. Right? Yeah.
So first and foremost, I'm not making it about me. I'm there to contribute.
Yep.
Right. And if I can find somebody else in that same social angst as I am, and I can help them through that, that's part of my table stakes, right? That's what I pay to play.
Yeah. So to know that you're not in the jungle alone, right?
You're not in the jungle alone.
Yep.
Honestly, you find somebody who's hoovering up the hors d'oeuvres, right? You know that person's probably not that comfortable being there. So go and help them out, right?
That's awesome.
Offer them a lifeline. So that's something that I always do. Don't feel pressured to go and work the whole room, honestly. An introvert is not going to be interested in that. It's going to drain you faster than leaving the lights on in your car overnight, right? So go and find one or two people and then have a conversation with them. Get to know them. Ask questions, right? This is not a situation where you just go and throw your business cards at people. No matter what everyone else is doing, you're there to contribute and to make connections, not contacts.
Right.
So the other thing is really give yourself that permission. Just, if I speak to one person tonight and I really get to know that person and I follow up with them and I have their card at the end of the night so I can call them back and say, that was a great conversation, thank you. That's good enough.
Yep.
Right? That is a good networking event for you.
Yep.
And if you can see somebody, and that's the other thing I encourage people to do, is think in terms of systems, right? Networks are systems. So if you think in terms of systems, you meet somebody, and through the course of the conversation, you find out that, let's say, they love skydiving, right? And you happen to know somebody else who's an avid skydiver. Feel free to introduce them, right? You're connecting for mutual benefit. And that's one of the things I think that people forget in networking situations is that when we talk about connecting for mutual benefit, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're connecting yourself. You may be connecting to other people for mutual benefit.
Yeah.
They'll remember who introduced them.
Yeah. That's actually great. More great advice from Lorrin is that the connection doesn't have to be to include you, right?
Correct.
Like you may be the conduit between two other people. And there's a level of fulfillment or satisfaction that comes out of that too, right? Is that if you are helping orchestrate the connection between other human beings, that's a powerful kind of skill to have, right?
It's energetically very powerful. It also builds strong social capital for you. Right? People remember who introduced them to people.
Yeah.
People remember who did a favor for them. People remember who contributed. And it becomes reciprocal over time. And so that's the thing to remember. There's one of the books that we'll talk about later is a book by Harvey Mackay, who is a big sales guru in the 80s or something. But he wrote this book called Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty, right? And if you think about it, nurturing and cultivating your community, right, is all about that. You digging the well before you're thirsty. You dig it, you do the work and you invest in it and you contribute long before you're going to need it to reciprocate, right? And that's where introverts really kind of rock it, because an introvert will make an investment in a one-on-one deep connection. And if you go back to the well analogy, there's a story about, the person who digs 15 wells and takes them, 15 feet deep and says, well, there's no water here, versus the person who digs one well, digs down until it's, maybe 60 feet deep, hits water, and then once that well is finished, then taps into another well. So it's not about how many people you know. It's about how well you're connected with them in terms of a very honest, real heart connection. Honestly, it's about, can I offer something to my community? Am I a part of this network? Am I a part of this system? Because if I'm just there to take, I'm not a functioning part of the system. Right? And
you're depleting it. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm just depleting it. And that, again, what goes around does come around. So we need to think about this long-term strategic investment, right? When we contribute to our community, when we build that social capital, we're doing it for its own sake a lot of the time. And guess what happens as a result of that? We become a more integral part of that community. And the more integral you are to a community, the more people will turn to you.
Yeah, that's great. It's this kind of organic growth, right?
Very much so.
That over the course of time. Yeah,
it takes us out of those events too, right? I mean, this is kind of the foundation for when you go into an event, but it's also the foundation for how you live your life, right? How you live your interactions with other people. So
yeah. What about outside of those kind of Chamber of Commerce-esque type of events? What are some other ways that introverts, or anyone for that matter, should consider a way to keep on networking?
Definitely. I mean, social media is a boon for an introvert, right? I love social media because I can stay in touch with people. I can connect with people. I can offer them some value without having to constantly be in front of them, right? So that's one thing. Definitely maintain your social networks on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, all of those, right? Don't get suckered into this idea of I must have 3,000 friends on Facebook. Right? If you've got 3,000 friends on Facebook and you're never connecting with them, that's less valuable than if you have 100 friends on Facebook and you're an integral part of their community. Yep. So think about that, right? Make sure that you take advantage of those cues that you get from social media where somebody has a life event or a promotion or something, and reach out, connect.
Yep.
I find personally, I do join some networking events, and then what I tend to do is I'll meet one or two people, and then I'll follow up and I'll have coffee with them, or I'll take them out to lunch. And when I take them out to lunch, I'm not taking them out to lunch to say, hey, can I have business? I'm there to learn about them, to hear their story, to be absolutely fascinated by them, right? Because people they're like books, right? They're myriad stories. They're interesting, so get to know them. And so once you do that, it's really interesting what tends to happen because, first of all, the better you listen, the better people think of you as a conversationalist. And you then know more about these people. You're going to find opportunities to connect them with value, right? And again, when you then go to them at some point and say, hey, I'd like a referral, or, would you mind helping me promote my event or whatever, they will say yes. Yeah. Because they're invested in you and you're invested in them. Right. They know that you're invested in them.
And you're not a stranger. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not a stranger, right? So do that. The other thing that I do is I'll send things to people. For example, a lady that I knew from my previous life, we're not good friends or anything, but it's stuck in my head that she likes quilting. And so whenever I see amazing quilts, I'll take a picture of them and I'll send it to her.
That's so nice.
And she's like, how did you know I like quilting? And then, that thing is be interested.
Yeah.
Don't focus so much on being interesting. Really kind of belong to the community. And that can be hard because that means that you're going to need to set priorities. You're going to need to set boundaries and you're going to need to invest. Right? So you can't be friends with the whole world.
Yeah.
You just can't, right? Choose your community and invest in it.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And where you're putting that energy. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pour your energy. As an introvert, if you do go to an event, be very mindful of how's my energy right now? Am I depleting myself by doing things that are not natural for me?
Yep.
And how do I take care of myself? How do I invest back in myself and say, you know what, I need to say no to this event tonight because I need some time to recharge.
Yep.
Or I need to make sure that I bring a friend along so that I have some social support or anything. Like people tend to think of self-care as this pedicures and massages. And really self-care is anything from have I hydrated myself enough today? Am I getting enough movement?
Yep.
To anything that is allowing you as part of your system to function. So what's keeping those cogs oiled?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it can be, have I worked out? Did I go to the gym? Am I a fit and healthy human being? As well as, have I had the opportunity to pamper myself lately? So think of self-care in a little bit of a broader context.
Yep.
And then operate from that standpoint of strength, right? And generosity. Because when you're taking care of yourself, you can be more generous and you can think of ways to connect people, right? Because you have that, you're operating from a healthy place rather than from a place of neglect and need.
I love it. I love it all, Lorrin. Thank you. This has been, this is awesome. And well, I know that you and I could just talk for hours about stuff. But we want to be able to share the show notes with listeners on thecareerq.com. I want to be able to also share with folks how to get in contact with you. So what's the best way for people to reach out?
Best way would be to email me. Okay. So that would be Lorrin@lorrinmaughan.com.
Okay, great.
And you'll also have all my social media stuff on there, so feel free.
And like you said, you're quite active in the social sphere. I love it. I love it. Okay, so let's get into a couple of quick questions that we ask each of our guests. These are kind of a little bit more lighthearted, but nonetheless, I think really important, right? And So let's start with what was your first job and what are some of the fundamentals that you have taken from that and that you still use today?
Right. Okay. So I was at university and all my friends had retail jobs and they were all accusing me of being a princess because I didn't have a job. And the thought of working retail made my toes curl. So I actually got a job looking after an invalid lady, an older lady who was, and interestingly enough, that was back in the olden days, but now you'd probably recognize it as she probably had some form of fibromyalgia or some kind of chronic systemic illness. But she was pretty much sensitive to everything. I couldn't wear deodorant. I couldn't wash my hair with smelly shampoo, anything. And so I would go in and take care of her. And she was an amazing, amazing woman. She was so fiery. And, she was so smart and sharp. And, we'd sit there, some evenings we'd sit there for hours, literally going through a bag of rice, grain by grain, and taking out the green grains or the grains that weren't perfect, right? Because her system was that sensitive. And so we had a lot of time to talk, and she absolutely inspired me. She taught me so much that I benefited from later on when I myself was on a journey of chronic illness. And also just in my whole career in my life, the importance of being your own advocate, the importance of researching and questioning the quote-unquote experts, right? Knowing yourself, knowing your limits, knowing your boundaries, and knowing how, she really, really instilled in me the importance of developing resilience and tenacity. And, those lessons are core to my whole life, to my animal activism, to my coaching practice, to everything. It's like, you've got to be resilient, you've got to be tenacious, and you've got to be an advocate. You've got to stand for something.
Wow. That's how incredible to learn that in your late teens, early 20s. Right.
And how much more fun than scooping ice cream for somebody in a mall.
Although there's some benefits to that too, right?
Right, true.
Well, that's great. So what have you read recently or watched or listened to that you'd recommend to some of our listeners?
Two things. One, I'm really enjoying the show Complicated on Sirius Business Radio. It's channel 111, hosted by Randy Zuckerberg. She's just a great interviewer, and it's a fun show. She talks to people about their businesses. I'm learning a lot from the people she interviews, so that's something that I'm enjoying a lot. Complicated.
Yeah.
And as far as reading, one of my areas of focus is improving the connection between humans and non-humans. And so to that end, I've actually been immersed in a book called Equisology, which is about applying temperament. So we talk about introverts, extroverts, if you've ever done a Myers-Briggs or a Kersey-Sorter, any of those sorts of things, that's your temperament, right? So this book is about how to apply those principles to the horse-human relationship. And it's actually something I'm becoming a certified facilitator to run Equisology workshops. And so we're looking, I look at my horses and I'm like, it's so obvious which of them is an introvert and which is an extrovert. And that they're teaching me so much by being more aware of who I am and who they are. And really, it's building this amazing relationship. So that's something, this isn't just something that you can apply to your human-human relationships.
Yeah.
It's bigger than that.
Yeah. Well, any being and all, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, well, we'll definitely have links to those recommendations in the show notes. That's great. So the last question, and, we're hoping that this is a thought-provoking question for folks, but, we always hear the whole, what would you say to your 20-year-old self? And my response is always like, well, unless there's a time machine, it's completely useless for me.
Right.
Right. So you're sitting down having a cup of tea with 90-year-old Lorrin, and what do you hope that she would tell you today?
Right now, I think the first thing she'd do is say, cut back on the sugar.
Knock it off. Yeah.
Or else I'm not going to hit 90. So that's something that she'd say. But she also would just remind me, stop overthinking. Just get out there and do stuff. And you know what? Everything, there's no such thing as a mistake. Just get out there and do it. It's an experiment. The whole of life is an experiment.
I love that. I often hear life is not a dress rehearsal, but I actually think I prefer life as an experiment.
It is, because you know what? You can just try something. If it doesn't work, I'll try something else,
just
right?
move on.
It's so much more fun and so much less pressure.
I love that. Okay. We've got so many quotes that we can pull from this interview. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Lorrin. This has been fantastic. We want to be able to continue the conversation. I'm looking forward to continuing to hear about the great work that you're doing. Definitely check out the show notes on how to get in touch with Lorrin, the great advice that she's provided today. And if you have an introvert in your life, forward them this podcast so they can hear it. Even if you don't know that many introverts, I suspect that there's a little nugget for everyone that they could take from here. So feel free to forward it to those people that you care about and you want to see grow and see what can come from it. So thanks again, Lorrin. We hope to talk to you soon. And
thank you so much, Stacy.
Yeah, we will catch you next time on thecareerq.com.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to head on over to thecareerq.com where you can get more information, show notes, and related articles to today's topic. Also, if you like what you're hearing, head on over to iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, and make sure you leave us a rating and review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks again.
The Career Q podcast is produced by Lens Group Media and recorded at Jack Straw Cultural Center in the lovely Seattle, Washington.